3 months earlier, I moved into the quiet neighborhood of Oakwood Terrace with nothing but 2 suitcases, a yoga mat, and the hope that distance would heal what therapy alone could not. 15 years with the police department, the last 7 as a SWAT instructor, had taken their toll. The incident that put me on leave was not something I discussed, not with the moving company, not with the realtor, and certainly not with my new neighbors. I needed anonymity. I needed peace. The house I purchased was modest but perfect. A single-story ranch with a spacious, private backyard surrounded by tall wooden fencing. The backyard faced east, capturing the morning sun through the branches of 2 mature oak trees. It was ideal for what my department psychologist had prescribed: daily meditation and physical therapy through yoga practice. The discipline would keep my body strong while giving my mind space to process the trauma. My morning routine became sacred. I would wake before dawn, brew a strong cup of coffee, and step into my backyard just as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. The yoga mat would roll out with a satisfying sound against the stone patio, and for the next hour, the world would shrink to nothing but controlled breathing and deliberate movement. For the first time in years, I found moments of true stillness. I first noticed her watching on my 5th morning, a shadow behind pristine white curtains in the 2-story colonial house that backed up to my property. Just the slight movement of fabric, the sense of eyes following my movements. I did not acknowledge it. In my line of work, being observed was normal. Being judged was irrelevant. Our first interaction came a week later as I trimmed the hedges along our shared property line. She appeared suddenly, standing ramrod straight in a powder blue cardigan despite the summer heat, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Your hedges are 3 inches over the property line," she stated without introduction. No greeting, no name. I smiled, extending my hand across the freshly cut greenery. "Good morning, I am Michael. I just moved in last week." She stared at my outstretched hand as if it were contaminated. "Barbara Winters, head of the Neighborhood Watch and HOA Ethics Committee. You need to cut these hedges back immediately. We have strict rules about property boundaries in Oakwood Terrace." I nodded agreeably. "Of course, I will take care of it today. Thank you for letting me know." Her eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps surprised by my compliance. She seemed to be searching for resistance, for conflict. Finding none, she gave a curt nod and turned sharply on her heel, walking back toward her immaculately landscaped yard. That evening, I received my first neighborhood noise complaint about my lawn mower being operated after 5 p.m. The following day, another neighbor stopped by with a basket of homemade muffins and a warning delivered in hushed tones. "Be careful with Barbara," the elderly woman whispered, glancing nervously toward the colonial house. "She has driven out 3 homeowners in the past 2 years. She does not like nonconformity." I thanked her for the muffins and the advice, but I was not concerned. After negotiating with armed hostage-takers and training officers to handle life-or-death situations, one disapproving neighbor seemed like a minor inconvenience. I continued my morning yoga, feeling her watchful presence growing more consistent, more focused, with each passing day. What I did not realize then was that my peaceful ritual was awakening something dangerous in Barbara Winters, something that would escalate beyond anything I could have imagined during those innocent beginnings. My backyard was becoming a battlefield, and neither of us yet knew that I had been training for this confrontation my entire career. The clicking sound was almost imperceptible at first, a gentle mechanical noise that blended with the morning birdsong, but after 15 years in law enforcement, certain sounds trigger awareness. The distinctive click of a camera shutter was one of them. I maintained my warrior pose, eyes closed but senses alert. Click, click, click. Barbara was photographing my morning yoga session from her 2nd-floor window. I completed my routine without acknowledgement. This was a development worth noting but not yet worth confronting. The next morning, the clicking continued, more deliberate now, as if she wanted me to hear it. By the 4th day, she had abandoned subtlety altogether, standing fully visible in her window with a telephoto lens pointed directly at me. That afternoon, the confrontation I had been anticipating finally arrived. Barbara marched across her lawn and stood at our property line, her posture rigid with righteous indignation. "Your morning activities need to be conducted indoors," she announced, her voice carrying across the yards loud enough for other neighbors to hear. "It is inap. Appropriate to be contorting yourself half-dressed where children might see." I set down my gardening trowel and stood slowly, maintaining a non-threatening posture. "Good afternoon, Barbara. I am fully clothed in athletic wear, and my yoga practice is on my private property, behind a 6-foot fence." "It is visible from second-story windows," she countered, her chin tilting upward. "And it is disturbing to those of us with traditional values. This is a family neighborhood." "I understand your concern," I replied calmly, employing the same measured tone I used in hostage negotiations. "But I am not violating any laws or even HOA regulations. I reviewed them carefully before purchasing." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "The HOA has provisions against activities that disturb the peace or diminish neighborhood character. You will be hearing from the committee." She stalked away before I could respond. That evening, my next-door neighbor Ryan invited me over for a beer on his patio. His expression was troubled as he handed me a cold bottle. "I overheard your conversation with Barbara earlier," he admitted. "You should know what you are up against. She drove the Jensen family out last year over a basketball hoop. Before that, it was the Millers because their garden gnome collection violated her sense of aesthetic propriety." "She seems to have significant influence," I observed. Ryan nodded grimly. "She has been head of the ethics committee for 5 years. No one challenges her because she collects dirt on everyone, knows every minor infraction, every rule violation. She has filed complaints that have resulted in thousands in fines for homeowners who cross her." The following morning, I found a printed note taped to my front door. The paper was expensive, the font formal. "Notice of indecent exposure. Your inappropriate public display of physical activity has been documented and submitted to the HOA Ethics Committee. Continued violations will result in formal action." The note was unsigned, but the message was clear. What surprised me was not the escalation but my own reaction to it. After years of high-stress tactical situations, I found myself experiencing a familiar sensation, the calm, focused awareness that precedes operational planning. Barbara Winters was employing a strategy I recognized from my training: isolate, intimidate, escalate. I attempted one final reasonable approach, knocking on her door that evening with a peace offering, a potted plant, and a printed copy of the HOA regulations with the relevant sections highlighted. No one answered, though I could see movement behind the curtains. 2 days later, police officers appeared at my door responding to a noise complaint. The alleged violation: disruptive heavy breathing and grunting during inappropriate morning activities. The officers looked embarrassed as they explained the nature of the complaint. I thanked them politely and assured them I would keep my breathing quieter. As they walked back to their patrol car, I felt something shift inside me. My psychology training allowed me to recognize what was happening. The tactics Barbara was employing were creating the very environment I had come here to escape, one of hypervigilance and tension. My morning ritual, meant to be healing, was becoming a source of stress. That night I lay awake, staring at my ceiling. The quiet voice of my tactical training whispered warnings. This situation was deteriorating rapidly. Containment was becoming less likely. De-escalation had failed, and for the first time since moving to Oakwood Terrace, I began to formulate a strategic response. The formal HOA complaint arrived by certified mail exactly 1 week after Barbara's confrontation at the fence. The envelope was thick, containing multiple pages of alleged violations, each one more ridiculous than the last. Inappropriate outdoor activities of a suggestive nature, deliberate exhibition causing neighborhood discomfort, violation of community standards of decency. What caught my attention was not the accusations themselves, but the letterhead. Barbara Winters was not merely on the HOA Ethics Committee, she was the chairperson. This explained the speed and severity of the escalation. She had not needed to convince others, she wielded the power directly. I spent that evening researching the HOA bylaws, regulations, and history. Information gathering is the foundation of any tactical operation. My SWAT training had taught me never to enter a situation without understanding the terrain, the players, and the rules of engagement. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a conservative button-down shirt and slacks, presenting an image of respectability and conformity. Several neighbors nodded hello, their expressions ranging from curious to sympathetic. No one sat beside me. The meeting began with standard business. Budget approvals, landscape contracts, discussions about the upcoming community picnic. Barbara sat at the head table, her posture perfect, her expression serene. She controlled the meeting with practiced efficiency, steering discussions, cutting off tangents, setting the pace and tone. I recognized the technique: establish authority, demonstrate control, build compliance. Then came the agenda item labeled simply, Ethics Committee Report, Compliance Issues at 437 Oakwood Drive. My address. Barbara stood, smoothing her immaculate blazer. We have received multiple complaints about inappropriate activities being conducted in public view at this address. A projector flickered to life, and suddenly there I was, displayed on the wall of the community center, a series of photos showing me in various yoga poses in my backyard. I immediately noticed the subtle manipulation. The images had been carefully selected and cropped to appear suggestive, the angles chosen to make standard yoga positions seem provocative. As you can see, Barbara continued, her voice dripping with artificial concern, these exhibitions are visible from neighboring properties and are causing significant distress to community members, particularly those with young families. I raised my hand, waiting to be acknowledged. Barbara pretended not to see me until another committee member pointed in my direction. Yes, she said, her tone suggesting an inconvenient interruption. I stood, addressing not Barbara but the room. Good evening. I am Michael Chen, the homeowner at 437 Oakwood. What you are seeing are standard yoga poses, recommended by my doctor as part of a physical therapy regimen. They are performed on private property, behind a privacy fence. Barbara cut in smoothly. The visibility from second-story windows makes this a public display. Furthermore, the noises associated with these activities have resulted in police complaints. A murmur ran through the room. I noticed several neighbors looking uncomfortable, eyes downcast, unwilling to meet my gaze. I had seen this before, the silent majority, intimidated into compliance. May I ask, I continued calmly, how many actual complaints have been filed and by how many different homeowners? Barbara's smile tightened. That information is confidential to protect those who have come forward. I see, so there is no way to verify if these complaints represent broad community concern or the opinion of a single individual. The tension in the room was palpable. A middle-aged man toward the back shifted in his seat, looking as if he might speak, then glanced at Barbara and remained silent. The Ethics Committee has reviewed the evidence and found it sufficient to issue a warning, Barbara declared, effectively ending discussion. 437 Oakwood will receive formal notice that these activities must be conducted indoors, with first violation resulting in a $500 fine and subsequent violations increasing to $1,000 per incident. The vote was called. 3 committee members, Barbara and 2 others who never once looked in my direction, raised their hands in favor. No one opposed. Abstentions were not called for. As the meeting adjourned, I remained seated, observing. Several neighbors approached me with whispered support. She does this to everyone who stands out, one woman murmured. We are sorry, an elderly man added, but challenging her makes things worse. I thanked them for their concern, but assured them I would be fine. What I did not tell them was that something had awakened inside me during that meeting, not anger, but the focused, strategic mindset that had served me through countless tactical operations. That evening, I installed high-definition security cameras covering every angle of my property. The system uploaded footage to cloud storage and sent alerts to my phone upon detecting movement. I positioned the cameras discreetly but not invisibly. Their presence was meant to be a deterrent as much as documentation. As I tested the system, I felt a familiar calm settling over me. This was no longer about yoga or noise complaints or neighborhood politics. This was about standing ground against a bully who had terrorized an entire community. The security cameras blinked their red lights in the gathering darkness, silent sentinels marking the beginning of a new phase in this unexpected operation. Despite the warning letter taped to my door the morning after the HOA meeting, I continued my yoga practice. The ritual had transformed from therapeutic routine to deliberate act of resistance. Each morning, I rolled out my mat at precisely the same time, performed the exact same sequence of poses, and documented everything with my new security system. On the third morning, water arced over the fence as I held warrior pose, spattering across my back and mat in a sudden, cold shower. I maintained position, eyes forward, breathing steady. The water came again, more forcefully. This time, from my peripheral vision, I could see Barbara standing on a stepladder behind her fence, garden hose in hand, deliberately spraying water onto my property. I completed my routine, ignoring the interruption entirely. The following morning, I set up a small waterproof tarp above my yoga area, a simple adaptation to a known threat. Barbara's response escalated immediately. The water was now directed at the tarp, creating a loud drumming noise that destroyed the peaceful atmosphere but did not stop my practice. Our silent battle continued for another week. Each morning brought a new tactic, loud music played from speakers pointed at my yard, the sudden operation of power tools during my session, a leaf blower running continuously from 6 a.m. until I finished my final pose. Then came the incursion. My security system alerted me while I was shopping for groceries. The footage showed Barbara entering my front yard, marching purposefully toward my door with a stack of wooden stakes topped with laminated signs. One by one, she drove them into my lawn, 5 signs forming a perimeter around my property. Even from the security footage, I could read the bold text, "Warning, indecent activity, shield children's eyes." I returned home to find a small audience of neighbors had gathered, watching uncertainly as Barbara completed her sign installation. She looked up as I parked, her expression a mixture of defiance and righteous certainty. This was a public challenge, designed to force confrontation on her terms. I exited my car slowly, carrying my grocery bags as if this were any normal afternoon. "Good day, everyone," I called pleasantly to the gathered neighbors. "Beautiful weather we are having." Setting my groceries on the porch, I walked to the nearest sign, read it carefully, then gently removed it from the ground. Barbara stepped forward immediately. "You cannot remove those," she declared loudly. "They are a public service announcement for the neighborhood." I continued to the next sign, removing it with the same calm efficiency. "These signs are on private property, placed without permission. I am simply removing unauthorized items from my lawn." "How dare you?" Barbara's voice rose sharply. "I am the Ethics Committee chair. Those signs are official HOA notifications." I paused, turning to face her directly for the first time. "May I see the HOA resolution authorizing placement of these specific signs, and the amendment to bylaws permitting committee members to enter private property without owner consent?" The neighbors watched in stunned silence. No one had ever questioned Barbara's authority so directly, so calmly. Her face flushed crimson. "You are making a serious mistake," she hissed. "I will make sure you regret moving to this neighborhood." I finished removing the signs, gathering them into a neat stack which I placed carefully on the neutral ground between our properties. "These belong to you. Please do not place them on my property again." Barbara's composure fractured completely. "Who do you think you are?" she shouted, advancing toward me with a pointed finger. "I have lived here for 20 years. I have protected this community from people like you, deviants and troublemakers who think the rules do not apply to them." Her voice had reached a pitch that drew more neighbors from their homes. Doors opened up and down the street as Barbara continued her tirade, growing more incoherent with each accusation. I stood perfectly still, hands visible at my sides, expression neutral, the stance I had taught hundreds of officers to use in volatile situations. "You have no idea who you are dealing with," she concluded, her breath coming in short gasps. I think that goes both ways, I replied quietly. The wail of police sirens approaching silenced any further exchange. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb, and I recognized Officer Ramirez and his partner stepping out. Barbara immediately rushed toward them. "This man is harassing me," she began. "He has been exposing himself in his backyard for weeks, and now he has threatened me for trying to protect the neighborhood." Officer Ramirez listened politely, then turned toward me with a look of recognition dawning on his face. "Wait, Sergeant Chen, from tactical training last year." I nodded. "Hello, Officer Ramirez. Good to see you again." The dynamic shifted instantly. Barbara looked from the officer to me and back again, confusion replacing certainty in her expression. "You know this man?" she demanded. "Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Chen ran our department's SWAT training program, one of the best instructors we ever had." Officer Ramirez turned back to me. "I heard you were on leave. Did not realize you had moved to Oakwood." "Medical leave," I confirmed, "just trying to recover quietly." Barbara's eyes widened as pieces clicked into place. The controlled movements, the disciplined responses, the unflappable calm under pressure. I was not the easy target she had assumed. "A SWAT instructor," she repeated, her voice suddenly uncertain. "Yes, ma'am," Officer Ramirez said. "Now, can you explain exactly what happened here today?" As Barbara struggled to reframe her complaint, neighbors began to volunteer information. The signs placed without permission, the water hose incidents, the constant harassment, the doctored photos at the HOA meeting. Years of accumulated grievances poured forth as the community found its voice. Officer Ramirez took detailed notes, then pulled me aside. "Do you want to press charges for trespassing?" I shook my head. "Not at this time. Documentation is sufficient for now." As the police departed with warnings about trespassing and harassment, Barbara stood alone on the sidewalk, her face a mask of cold calculation. Our eyes met briefly, and what I saw there sent a chill of professional recognition down my spine. This was not over. This was merely shifting to a new phase of engagement. That night, as I reviewed security footage from the confrontation, I noticed Barbara taking pictures of my license plate and the security cameras themselves. She was gathering intelligence, adapting her strategy. The tactical part of my brain approved of her methodology even as it recognized the escalating threat. Something had fundamentally changed. Barbara now knew who I was, but more dangerously, she believed she knew what I was capable of. Fear can make an opponent unpredictable, and unpredictable adversaries are always the most dangerous kind. The whispers began 3 days after the confrontation in my front yard. At first, just fragments reaching me through sympathetic neighbors. Barbara was telling people I had been forced to leave the police department due to psychological instability, that I had violent tendencies, that my yoga was actually a form of combat training I was practicing in full view of the neighborhood as an intimidation tactic. I documented each rumor methodically, adding the information to a growing file. My training had taught me that information was power and evidence was protection. I continued my daily routine without variation, refusing to be driven into hiding by gossip and innuendo. The morning I found my car vandalized, the temperature had already reached 80 degrees before dawn, promising another sweltering summer day. The word "GO away" had been scratched deeply into the driver's side door, the metal curls still fresh and shining in the early light. I photographed the damage from multiple angles before reviewing the security footage. The cameras had captured everything. At 2:17 a.m., a figure in dark clothing and a hooded sweatshirt had approached from the street, moving with deliberate purpose toward my vehicle. Despite the disguise, the height, build, and distinctive gait were unmistakable. Barbara had graduated from rumors to property damage. I took the footage to the police station, filing a formal report with Officer Ramirez. He reviewed the video carefully, his expression grim. "This is definitely concerning, Sergeant," he said, "but without seeing her face clearly, it will be difficult to pursue charges. The district attorney would say we cannot positively identify the suspect beyond reasonable doubt." I nodded, understanding the legal reality. I do not expect charges. I am establishing a pattern of behavior and documenting escalation." Officer Ramirez looked at me with professional concern. "You think this will continue to escalate?" "Yes," I answered simply. "She is following a predictable trajectory. First social pressure, then administrative action, then property damage. Each failure to achieve her goal is triggering more extreme responses." "And what is her goal in your assessment?" I considered the question carefully. To remove what she perceives as a threat to her authority and control. The report was filed, the footage saved, the car repaired. Life in Oakwood Terrace continued its surface normality while tensions built beneath. Barbara had begun gathering signatures for a petition demanding the HOA board take decisive action against dangerous elements threatening community safety. Several neighbors warned me about it, apologizing for their own signatures, extracted through years of built-up fear and intimidation. Every morning I rolled out my yoga mat. Every morning I felt Barbara watching from her window. The frequency of police calls increased, noise complaints, parking violations, allegations of suspicious persons entering my home. Each visit ended with apologetic officers and no citations, further fueling Barbara's frustration. Then came the petition, a formal document delivered to my door by a visibly uncomfortable HOA board member who could not meet my eyes as he handed over the envelope. Inside was a demand for my eviction from the neighborhood on grounds of creating an environment of fear and moral corruption. The document bore 27 signatures. Nearly half the households in Oakwood Terrace. I read it calmly, thanked the board member for hand-delivering it, and closed my door on his stammered explanation. Inside, I added the petition to my growing file. The situation was approaching a critical threshold. Every tactical assessment pointed toward imminent confrontation. That confrontation came on a perfect summer morning, the kind that had drawn me to this neighborhood in the first place. The air was still cool, birds singing in the oak trees, dew glistening on the manicured lawns. I had just moved into Warrior II pose, arms extended, gaze focused beyond my fingertips, when Barbara appeared at the fence line. "This ends today," she called, her voice carrying through the quiet neighborhood. "The board meets tonight to vote on your removal. Your perverted exhibitions are finished in Oakwood Terrace." I maintained my pose, breathing steadily, acknowledging her presence with only the slightest nod. "Did you hear me?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You have corrupted this community for the last time." I completed the pose sequence before straightening to face her. "Good morning, Barbara. I received the petition. Thank you for coordinating the neighborhood feedback." My calm response visibly infuriated her. "Do not mock me. You think you are so superior with your police background and your fancy training. You are nothing but a deviant who could not even keep his job." Several neighbors had emerged onto their patios and decks, drawn by the commotion. Barbara seemed energized by the audience, her voice growing louder. "Everyone knows you were forced out. Everyone knows what you really are. We do not want your kind here." I remained silent, observing her escalating behavior with the detached analysis my training had instilled. Her pupils were dilated, her gestures increasingly erratic, classic signs of adrenaline surge and emotional overwhelm. This was the moment where tactical officers would establish a perimeter and call for negotiation support. "Say something," she screamed, her composure completely abandoned. "Stop standing there judging everyone. Stop pretending to be better than the rest of us." "Barbara," I said quietly, "I think you should take a moment to calm yourself. We can discuss community concerns rationally." "Do not tell me to calm down." She reached into her cardigan pocket, and years of training sent immediate warning signals through my system. The gesture was distinct, unmistakable to anyone with tactical experience, the retrieval movement for a concealed weapon. Time seemed to slow as she pulled out a small snub-nosed revolver, its metal surface catching the morning light. Part of my mind registered the make and model automatically, a .38 special, common for personal protection, 5-round cylinder, effective but not accurate at distance. "Barbara," I said, my voice shifting instantly to the commanding tone used in crisis situations, "put the firearm down." She pointed it toward me with a trembling hand. "You are going to leave Oakwood Terrace. Today, pack your perverted lifestyle and get out of our community." I assessed the situation in fractions of seconds. Distance to cover, approximately 15 feet. Available barriers, stone garden bench to my left. Civilian presence, multiple neighbors now visible on surrounding properties, all potential collateral risks. Subject mental state, highly agitated, unstable grip on weapon, finger on trigger, immediate threat. "Barbara, listen carefully. You are committing a felony offense. Lower the weapon and we can resolve this situation peacefully." Her response was to squeeze the trigger. The report cracked through the morning stillness as I dove toward the stone bench. The bullet struck my ceramic planter, shattering it into fragments that scattered across the patio. Neighbors screamed. Doors slammed as people rushed inside for safety or to call police. From behind the bench, I shifted into full operational mode. The garden hose lay within reach, a potential distraction tool. The bench itself provided cover from direct fire, but not from an advancing attacker. Barbara remained at the fence line, the weapon still raised, but her expression now showing the first signs of shock at what she had done. The morning sun glinted off the revolver as reality settled over Oakwood Terrace. This quiet suburban neighborhood had become an active shooter situation, and I was no longer a neighbor doing yoga. I was not even a SWAT instructor on leave. I was a trained professional facing a lethal threat with civilian lives at risk. "Drop the weapon, control your finger, step back from the fence." My voice carried the unmistakable command presence developed through years of crisis response. I emerged partially from behind the bench, hands visible, stance balanced and ready. This was not the friendly neighbor Barbara had been terrorizing for months. This was the SWAT instructor who had trained hundreds of officers to handle exactly this type of situation. Barbara's eyes widened as she registered the transformation. The gun remained pointed in my direction, but her grip had weakened, uncertainty replacing rage in her expression. "You shot at me, Barbara," I continued, my tone controlled but forceful. "That is attempted murder. Right now you have options. In 30 seconds when police arrive, those options disappear. Drop the weapon." "You were supposed to leave," she said, her voice small and confused. "Everyone always leaves." "The weapon, Barbara, place it on the ground and step back." I maintained eye contact, moving slowly to my right to create distance from potential follow-up shots. From surrounding houses, neighbors watched in stunned silence as I continued my measured approach. 2 houses down, Ryan had positioned himself to shield his wife and child. Across the street, another neighbor was frantically gesturing for children to get back inside. They were all potential casualties if this situation went wrong. "Barbara, listen to my voice," I continued, using the negotiation techniques I had taught for years. "You do not want to hurt anyone. This is not who you are. Place the gun on the ground. Do it now." Her hand trembled visibly. "Everything was perfect before you came. The neighborhood was perfect." "And it can be again," I assured her, taking one careful step forward. "But first, you need to put down the gun." In the distance, sirens wailed, help approaching but still minutes away. Barbara's gaze flickered toward the sound, momentary panic crossing her features. Her finger tightened reflexively on the trigger. "Look at me, Barbara," I commanded, drawing her attention back. "Not at the sirens, at me. I am right here with you. We are going to resolve this together." I had positioned myself exactly 12 feet from her position, close enough to control the situation if necessary, far enough to have reaction time if she fired again. My hands remained visible, my posture non-threatening but prepared. "The police are coming," I explained calmly. "When they arrive, they will see a woman with a gun. They will respond with lethal force if necessary. I do not want that to happen. You do not want that to happen." Something in my tone finally reached her. The resolve that had fueled her campaign of harassment crumbled visibly. The gun lowered slowly toward the ground. "Place it down gently," I instructed, "then step back 3 paces from the fence." The revolver touched the grass with a soft thud. Barbara retreated as directed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Only then did I move forward, maintaining visual contact while retrieving the weapon with practiced efficiency, immediately clearing the cylinder and securing the ammunition separately. Police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of both our houses. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, shouting commands. I identified myself immediately, following their instructions to the letter despite being known to several of them. There is no room for ego or assumption in tactical situations. Weapon is secure, I called clearly. Suspect is compliant, no additional threats identified. The officers approached cautiously, securing Barbara in handcuffs as neighbors poured into the street, offering statements and video footage captured on cell phones. The evidence was overwhelming and unambiguous. Barbara Winters had attempted to shoot a neighbor for doing yoga in his backyard. As she was placed in the back of a patrol car, Barbara finally looked at me directly. The anger was gone, replaced by something far more complicated, the stunned recognition of someone who had catastrophically misread a situation. I provided my statement to the responding officers, my training allowing me to recall precise details of the incident, the time, the distance, the exact words exchanged, the angle of the shot. The ceramic fragments from my shattered planter were collected as evidence of the bullet's impact. When the immediate scene was secure, I felt the adrenaline begin to ebb, leaving the hollow feeling I recognized from previous operational deployments. My heart rate, which had remained controlled throughout the confrontation, now accelerated as my body processed the delayed stress response. Officer Ramirez approached as I sat on my front steps, evidence bags being carried past us to waiting vehicles. "You okay, Sergeant?" he asked quietly. I nodded automatically, but the truth was more complex. The peaceful recovery I had sought in Oakwood Terrace now seemed like a naive fantasy. I had come here to escape exactly this kind of situation, the split-second decisions, the management of lethal threats, the weight of responsibility for everyone's safety. Yet when crisis arrived, I had slipped back into that role as easily as breathing. The emergency HOA meeting 3 days after the shooting had record attendance. Every chair in the community center was full. Led with residents standing along the walls. The mood was somber, introspective, a neighborhood confronting uncomfortable truths about itself. I had not planned to attend. The investigation was ongoing. Barbara remained in custody facing multiple felony charges, and I had given serious thought to selling my house and trying again somewhere else. But a delegation of neighbors had come to my door that morning, led by Ryan and the elderly woman who had first warned me about Barbara. "We need you there," Ryan had said simply. "The community needs to hear the truth." So I stood at the podium, facing my neighbors, many of whom could not meet my eyes. The shame of collective silence, of years of enabling Barbara's reign of terror, hung heavy in the room. "My name is Michael Chen," I began. "I moved to Oakwood Terrace seeking peace and recovery. I'm a SWAT instructor on medical leave following a traumatic incident in the line of duty. What happened here was not about yoga or property lines or community standards. It was about fear, control, and what happens when a community surrenders its voice." The room was silent as I recounted the escalating harassment, the manipulation of HOA rules, the doctored photos, and finally, the gunshot that could have ended my life. I did not speak with anger, but with the measured clarity of someone presenting evidence. "Many of you knew what was happening," I continued. "Not just to me, but to others before me. You knew, and you remained silent because the alternative seemed worse than compliance." Heads nodded reluctantly throughout the room. One by one, neighbors stood to share their own experiences. The family pressured to remove their child's therapeutic swing set. The widow fined repeatedly for planting non-approved flowers on her husband's memorial garden. The young couple driven out by constant complaints about their cultural decorations during holidays. The pattern was clear, consistent, and heartbreaking. Barbara had weaponized community rules to enforce not order but personal control, punishing any deviation from her vision of perfection. The newly appointed HOA president, a retired judge who had previously kept his distance from neighborhood politics, called for a community commitment to change. The ethics committee was disbanded and reconstituted with term limits and transparency requirements. Documentation of Barbara's previous actions was reviewed, with formal apologies issued to former residents who had been driven away. As the meeting concluded, neighbors approached me, not with the awkward sympathy I had expected, but with genuine remorse and determination. The elderly woman who had first warned me clasped my hand in both of hers. "Will you stay?" she asked quietly. "The neighborhood needs people who stand up for what is right." 2 weeks later, I held my first community self-defense class on the community center lawn. The irony was not lost on me that I was teaching safety techniques in the same space where Barbara had once projected doctored photos of my yoga practice. 15 neighbors attended that first session, learning not just physical techniques, but the importance of community vigilance and support. The following month, the district attorney's office contacted me about Barbara's case. She had accepted a plea deal including mandatory psychiatric treatment, community service, and a restraining order preventing her return to Oakwood Terrace. Her house was already on the market. That evening, I rolled out my yoga mat in my backyard as the sun began to set. For the first time since moving to the neighborhood, I felt the true peace I had been seeking. As I moved through my practice, I noticed the neighboring windows, not with curtains drawn in fear or surveillance, but open to the evening air. On one patio, a neighbor nodded respectfully before returning to watering her garden. On another, a family sat enjoying dinner without tension or wariness. It struck me then that true strength exists not in standing alone against adversity, but in creating spaces where vulnerability can be shared and supported. My SWAT training had taught me to neutralize threats and protect others in moments of crisis. But here in Oakwood Terrace, I was learning something equally valuable: how to help build a community that protects itself through connection rather than fear. As I finished my final pose, the setting sun cast long shadows across my backyard. The fence that had once been a battle line now simply marked the friendly boundary between neighbors. The yoga that had sparked so much conflict had ultimately led to healing, not just for me, but for an entire community finding its voice again.